Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody remembers seeing. The crystal chandeliers above Maison Laurent shimmered against polished marble, as Manhattan's elite laughed over $400 bottles of wine and million-dollar conversations they assumed no ordinary person could understand. Claire Bennett moved quietly between the tables with a silver tray balanced effortlessly in one hand, her black uniform crisp, her blonde hair tied back in a simple knot that made her almost invisible among the luxury surrounding her. That was how the customers liked their waitresses. Quiet, pleasant, forgettable. Claire preferred it that way. After 10 hours on her feet, invisibility felt safer than attention. Table 12 needs another bottle of Bordeaux, the manager whispered sharply as he rushed past her. And smile tonight. Ethan Cole is here. Several servers exchanged nervous glances immediately. Even in Manhattan, Ethan Cole carried the kind of reputation that changed the temperature of a room. Billionaire tech investor. Ruthless negotiator. The man who once walked out of a merger because someone served the wrong whiskey. Claire simply nodded and reached for the wine bottle. She had heard the stories before. Powerful men rarely surprised her anymore. Across the dining room, Ethan sat surrounded by executives in tailored suits, his silver watch catching the warm light every time he checked the time. Everything about him looked controlled. The sharp navy suit, the calm posture, the unreadable gray eyes that scanned people the same way others scan stock reports. Yet something about him felt tired tonight. Not physically, emotionally. Claire noticed small things most people missed. The untouched drink beside his hand. The way his fingers tapped once every few seconds against the tablecloth. The tension hiding beneath expensive confidence. "Your Bordeaux, sir," Claire said softly as she poured the wine. Ethan barely looked at her. "Leave it." His voice was low, distracted. One of the executives laughed nervously while sliding a contract across the table. "Once Tokyo signs tonight, we're looking at almost $200 million in annual expansion." Ethan gave a short nod, but before he could answer, his phone vibrated sharply against the table. The moment he saw the caller ID, his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for Claire to notice. He answered immediately, speaking rapid Japanese under his breath. At first the executive smiled politely, pretending not to notice. Then the conversation continued. Faster now. Tense. Ethan suddenly stood so quickly his wine glass tipped sideways, red liquid spilling across the white tablecloth like a spreading wound. "What do you mean the translator left?" one executive whispered frantically. Another adjusted his tie. "We can delay the signing." Ethan slammed his hand against the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "Dorimo wakatinai," he snapped in Japanese. Nobody understood me. Silence spread across the restaurant. Nearby diners turned toward the commotion. The manager froze near the kitchen entrance. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ethan pressed a hand against his forehead while the voice on the phone continued speaking rapidly in panicked Japanese. Then Claire heard one word that made her heart stop for half a second. "Haho. Mother." Her eyes lifted slowly toward Ethan. The billionaire looked nothing like the powerful man from magazine covers anymore. He looked like a son trying not to fall apart in public. Claire swallowed quietly. She should walk away. She should stay invisible. Instead, she stepped closer to the table. "Sir," she said gently. Ethan looked up with irritation flashing across his face. Then Claire answered the voice on his phone in flawless Japanese. The entire restaurant went silent. The woman on the phone was crying softly in Japanese, her voice trembling through the speaker while every executive at the table sat frozen in confusion. Claire kept her tone calm and respectful as she answered. "Yes, he is here. Please slow down. He can hear you." Ethan stared at her like the room had suddenly shifted beneath his feet. The waitress standing beside him no longer looked invisible. She sounded like someone who belonged inside the conversation nobody else could enter. Claire handed the phone back carefully. "Your mother is asking whether you ate dinner tonight," she translated quietly. One of the executives blinked in disbelief. Another lowered his wine glass halfway to the table. Ethan said nothing for several seconds. He only took the phone with slow movements, as if afraid the moment would disappear if he moved too quickly. Then he answered his mother again in Japanese, but this time his voice softened. Claire stepped back immediately. She knew the difference between helping someone and humiliating them with kindness. The restaurant remained silent except for the distant clinking of silverware somewhere near the bar. Even the manager stopped pretending to organize menus. Everyone was watching now. Ethan finally ended the call and lowered the phone into his lap. His jaw tightened once before he looked up at Claire again. "Where did you learn Japanese?" he asked quietly. Claire adjusted the sleeve of her uniform. "Kyoto." Ethan frowned slightly. "You lived there?" "For 8 years." Her answer was simple. Controlled. But Ethan noticed the hesitation behind it. He noticed many things suddenly. The careful pronunciation. The formal posture. The way she lowered her eyes respectfully when speaking Japanese but held herself differently in English. This was not a party trick. This was history. "You speak Kyoto dialect," Ethan said slowly. "Not Tokyo standard." Claire gave the smallest nod. "My father believed language should sound warm, not efficient." Something changed in Ethan's face at those words. Not shock this time. Recognition. Across the table, one of the executives cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Cole, Tokyo is waiting on the contract approval." Ethan did not even look at him. His attention remained fixed on Claire. "Would you stay for a moment?" The manager nearly dropped the tray he was holding. Waitresses did not sit with billionaires at Maison Laurent. That was the kind of thing people whispered about for months. Claire seemed to understand this immediately because she glanced toward the dining room before answering. "I am working." "I know." Ethan's voice remained calm. "But I need someone I can trust to translate." Claire hesitated. Not because of Ethan. Because of the room. She could already feel the weight of eyes following her. Wealthy customers loved stories about mysterious waitresses until those women stopped being background decoration and became human beings instead. 5 minutes, Ethan said quietly. "Please." Claire slowly sat at the edge of the empty chair beside him. One executive exchanged confused looks with another. Ethan ignored them all. "My mother is in a hospital outside Kyoto," he explained. "The doctors called during the meeting because she refuses to speak to the interpreter they hired." Claire lowered her gaze slightly. "She is frightened." Ethan looked surprised. "How did you know that?" Claire folded her hands carefully in her lap. "Because she kept apologizing before every sentence." Ethan went still. Completely still. Like someone had opened a door to a memory he spent years trying to lock away. For the first time that night, the billionaire looked less like a powerful man and more like a tired son sitting alone at a dinner table full of strangers. Then Claire noticed something else. Ethan's phone screen was still glowing softly beside his hand, and reflected faintly in the dark glass was a message notification in Japanese that made her stomach tighten instantly. She read only a few words before her expression changed. Ethan noticed. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Claire looked up slowly. "Mr. Cole," she whispered, "I do not think the person texting you is telling the truth about your mother." The rain had not stopped by the time Christina stepped out of the subway station in Queens. Cold droplets tapped softly against the hood of her gray coat as she walked the final 2 blocks toward the apartment building she shared with 2 roommates. Manhattan glittered behind her like another universe. Sharp lights. Glass towers. Expensive dinners. Men like Jack Anderson belonged to that world. Not her. She climbed the narrow stairs quietly, careful not to wake anyone, but the moment she opened the apartment door, voices drifted from the kitchen. "Christina!" Mia appeared first, still wearing sweatpants and holding a mug of tea. "Thank God. Your phone died again." Christina forced a tired smile. "Long shift." Then she noticed the unopened envelope spread across the table beside Mia's laptop. Bills. Tuition reminders. Late notices. Reality waiting patiently for her return. "Your landlord called," Mia said softly. "Again." Christina nodded once and removed her damp coat. Her shoulders ached from carrying plates for 10 hours, but the heavier weight sat somewhere deeper. Somewhere invisible. "I will handle it." Mia hesitated before lowering her voice. "Chrissy, who was that guy tonight?" Christina paused. Jack's face flashed through her mind. The expensive watch. The calm confidence. The way his expression changed after she answered his question. "Just a customer." Customers do not leave $5,000 tips. Christina looked down at the business card still tucked inside her pocket. Jack Anderson. Private number handwritten in dark blue ink. Sharp handwriting. Precise. Controlled. Like everything else about him. He was curious, she said quietly. Mia folded her arms. About what? Christina gave a faint smile that never fully reached her eyes. Apparently waitresses with opinions about financial markets. Mia laughed softly, but Christina did not. Because underneath the humor sat something dangerous. Attention. She had spent 3 years avoiding it. 3 years hiding behind uniforms and polite smiles after everything collapsed. Columbia. Internships. Research programs. Future plans. Gone in one brutal season she still could not think about for too long. She moved toward the tiny kitchen sink and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion. Or maybe from memory. You should call him, Mia said carefully. Christina stared out the fogged kitchen window. Men like him do not see people like me. Maybe that is why he keeps looking. Christina said nothing. Because the truth unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Jack had looked at her differently by the end of the night. Not with pity. Not with desire. With curiosity. Respect maybe. And that was somehow more dangerous. Across the city, inside a penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Jack Anderson stood beside the window with his suit jacket draped over one shoulder. His assistant's full report sat open across the desk. Christina Matthews. 25 years old. Community college records. Restaurant employment. Nothing exceptional. And yet every instinct in his body told him the file was incomplete. He picked up the transcript from tonight's market discussion again. Emerging market infrastructure. Municipal tax shelters. Regulatory incentives. No ordinary waitress spoke like that. He loosened his tie slowly. Who are you? He murmured to himself. Outside, thunder rolled faintly above Manhattan. Jack rarely lost interest in people this quickly. Usually he understood them within minutes. Their motivations. Their weaknesses. Their price. But Christina Matthews felt different. Quiet. Guarded. Like someone standing behind locked doors with all the lights turned off. And for the first time in years, Jack realized he wanted to know what was hidden inside. Saturday arrived wrapped in snow and silver light. Manhattan looked softer in December, as if even the city itself wanted to forget how cold it could be. Christina adjusted the sleeves of her dark green sweater as she stepped out of the diner after her morning shift, her breath turning into pale clouds against the freezing air. Christmas decorations hung above the streets. Red ribbons. Golden lights. Storefront windows glowing with artificial warmth. She normally loved this season. This year felt different. Heavier somehow. Her phone buzzed inside her coat pocket. Unknown number. Christina hesitated before answering. Hello. You almost never check your messages, do you? Jack's voice carried the same calm confidence she remembered, but softer now. Less guarded. Christina stopped walking beneath the awning of a bookstore. How did you get this number? You wrote it on an employee emergency form 3 years ago. A pause. Kidding. Your manager gave it to me after I bribed him with expensive coffee. Against her will, Christina smiled faintly. Snowflakes landed quietly against her hair. That sounds illegal. Probably. Silence settled between them for a moment, strangely comfortable. She could hear distant traffic. Christmas music drifting from a nearby shop. Why are you calling, Jack? She asked quietly. His answer came slower this time. More honest. Because I have spent the last 48 hours thinking about a waitress who talks like a financial strategist and looks at me like I am not the most important person in the room. Christina lowered her eyes. Maybe you are not. Jack laughed softly under his breath. Real laughter. Not the polished kind she imagined he used in boardrooms. There is a Christmas charity gala tonight, he said. Marcus forced me to agree to another blind date. Apparently he thinks I need human interaction. Christina leaned lightly against the cold brick wall behind her. That sounds tragic. It is. But then I had an idea. She already knew where this was going. No. You did not even let me finish. You were going to ask me to go with you. I was. Christina closed her eyes briefly. Men like Jack Anderson belonged beside women in designer gowns and diamond earrings. Women who understood luxury hotels and private flights and silent auctions worth more than her yearly rent. "I am not your type," she said softly. Jack's answer came immediately. That might be the point. The wind picked up slightly around her. Somewhere nearby, children laughed while building a crooked snowman beside the sidewalk. Christina pressed the phone closer to her ear. "You barely know me. I know you are smart." His voice lowered. "I know you are careful with people because someone taught you to be. I know you pretend not to care when customers insult you, but your eyes change when they do. And I know you have spent years making yourself smaller, so the world feels comfortable around you." Christina's chest tightened unexpectedly. Nobody had ever said it out loud before. Not like that. She swallowed carefully. "You should not analyze people for a living, Jack." Too late. "It made me rich." Another pause. Then quieter. "Come with me tonight." Christina stared across the snowy street as headlights reflected against wet pavement. She should say no. Every logical part of her mind screamed that she should. But another part remembered the way he had looked at her at the restaurant. Curious. Respectful. Human. "I do not own a dress for billionaire Christmas galas," she admitted finally. Jack's voice softened again. "Christina." "What?" "I am not asking because of the dress." Snow continued falling gently around her as she stood there in silence, feeling something dangerous begin to shift inside her heart. The charity gala occupied the entire top floor of the Blackstone Hotel, glowing above Manhattan like a floating palace of gold and crystal. Christina stood near the ballroom entrance adjusting the cuffs of her white uniform while guests in velvet dresses and tailored tuxedos drifted across the marble floor beneath enormous chandeliers. Soft Christmas music filled the air. Expensive laughter followed it. Somewhere beyond the crowd, cameras flashed as business executives posed beside a 20-foot Christmas tree, wrapped in silver lights. Christina lowered her eyes and continued balancing a tray of champagne glasses through the room. This world still felt unreal to her. Beautiful, but cold. Across the ballroom, Jack Anderson stood surrounded by investors and politicians, though his attention kept drifting elsewhere. Toward the waitress in the dark green eyes who somehow looked calmer than anyone in the room. She moved quietly between conversations worth millions of dollars without ever trying to belong to them. That alone fascinated him. "You are staring again," Marcus muttered beside him while sipping bourbon. Jack adjusted his cufflinks without looking away. "I am observing." Marcus smirked. "Right. That is what emotionally unavailable billionaires call flirting." Jack ignored him, though part of him knew Marcus was enjoying this far too much. Then the ballroom doors opened again. A tall blonde woman entered wearing a silver designer gown that caught the attention of half the room instantly. Vanessa Carlyle, daughter of a hedge fund billionaire. The woman Marcus had secretly arranged for Jack's blind Christmas date weeks earlier. Vanessa approached with practiced elegance before kissing Jack lightly on the cheek. "Sorry I am late." Her eyes scanned the ballroom quickly. "Traffic was horrible." "You made it," Jack said politely. But something in his voice lacked enthusiasm. Christina noticed the exchange from across the room while setting down fresh drinks near the piano. She told herself not to care. Men like Jack belonged with women like that. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. Perfect world. Still, something uncomfortable tightened quietly inside her chest. Vanessa followed Jack toward a private table beside the dance floor while guests discreetly watched them. Manhattan loved wealthy people pretending to fall in love during Christmas. It looked good in magazines. 20 minutes later, Christina approached their table to refill water glasses. Vanessa barely glanced at her. "Another sparkling water," she said while checking her phone. "And make sure it is cold this time." Christina nodded calmly. "Of course, ma'am." But before she could leave, Vanessa looked toward Jack with a careless laugh. "Honestly, Ethan was right. You really do collect sad-looking waitresses." The words landed softly, but sharply enough. Christina froze for half a second before lowering her eyes again. Around them, nearby conversations continued untouched beneath the Christmas music. Jack's expression changed immediately. Cold. Controlled. "Excuse me." Vanessa shrugged casually. "Oh, come on. Every year you pick some random charity project to feel human for a week." Christina quietly placed the water glass onto the table. Her hands remained steady despite the heat rising behind her eyes. "Your water, ma'am." She turned to leave. "Wait." Jack stood suddenly, his chair scraping lightly against the polished floor. The entire table went silent. "You owe her an apology." Vanessa blinked in disbelief. "To a waitress?" Jack's jaw tightened. "To a person." Across the ballroom, Marcus slowly lowered his drink, already sensing disaster approaching. Vanessa laughed once under her breath before grabbing her purse. "Unbelievable." She looked toward Christina dismissively. "Congratulations. Apparently Christmas miracles are real after all." Then she walked away beneath the glittering ballroom lights, leaving Jack standing alone beside an untouched dinner table, while whispers spread quietly through the room. Christina remained frozen near the piano, unsure what to say. Jack looked at her for a long moment. Not embarrassed. Not angry. Just tired somehow. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "That should not have happened." Christina studied him beneath the warm Christmas lights reflecting in the ballroom windows. Outside, snow continued falling silently over Manhattan. The snowstorm hit Manhattan harder just after midnight, swallowing streets in a thick white silence that made the city feel unfamiliar. Inside the small diner on the corner of 48th Street, warm yellow light spilled onto the icy sidewalk, flickering softly against the glass windows covered in frost. Ethan Blackwell stood outside for a moment, hesitating, his expensive coat now dusted with snow. The last time he had felt this unsure of himself, he could not remember. Inside, Claire Donovan moved calmly between tables, her voice soft but steady as she handed out hot chocolate to strangers who had nowhere else to go that night. No cameras, no investors, no recognition, just people. Ethan finally pushed the door open. A small bell rang above him. Nobody turned to look at him. That alone felt strange. In his world, people always looked. "You are going to stand there all night?" Claire's voice came from behind the counter without judgment. Ethan stepped inside slowly, brushing snow from his shoulders. "I think I am stranded," he said quietly. Claire nodded once as if that was the most normal thing in the world. "Then you picked the right place to be stranded." She poured him a cup of hot chocolate without asking his name. He watched her hands carefully. Steady, calm. The same hands that had refused to be intimidated by wealth, anger, or pride. Around them, the diner was filled with soft conversations. A mother warming her child's hands. An elderly man laughing for the first time that night. No one cared about status here. Ethan sat at a corner booth, still watching Claire as she moved. Something about her felt different from everyone he knew. Not soft. Not fragile. Real. A man across the room dropped a few coins near the counter. Claire noticed immediately. Without hesitation, she walked over, picked up the coins, and added her own money from the tip jar before handing it back to him. "You forgot this," she said gently. The man tried to protest, but she simply smiled and walked away. Ethan frowned slightly. He had seen billion-dollar deals collapse faster than that moment of quiet generosity. Later, while the storm howled outside, Ethan overheard Claire speaking to a young woman near the kitchen. The woman was crying quietly, holding a hospital bill in her hands. Without hesitation, Claire reached under the counter and pulled out an envelope. "This is not charity," she said softly. "This is help." The woman tried to refuse, but Claire gently pressed it into her hand anyway. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He had spent his entire life measuring value in numbers, contracts, and assets. But nothing he owned felt as heavy as what he was witnessing in that small diner. As midnight passed, the storm outside grew louder, but inside the diner, everything felt strangely still. Ethan finally stood and walked toward the counter. Claire looked up at him briefly. "Still stranded?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but not in the way I expected." For the first time that night, Claire paused, really looked at him. Not as a millionaire, not as a name, just as a person trying to understand something he had never been taught. "Good," she said quietly. "Sometimes getting lost is the only way people learn where they actually belong." Outside, the snow continued to fall over Manhattan, covering everything in silence, while inside the diner, A man who once controlled everything realized he no longer understood the value of anything at all. The moment Ethan Blackwell and Claire Donovan stood in the same space after the argument at the gala, the air between them felt different, heavier in a way neither of them acknowledged. Outside the Blackstone Hotel, snow continued falling in thick, silent layers, turning Manhattan into a blurred painting of white and gold light. Inside, the Christmas music played softly again, as if the interruption had never happened. Claire moved first, returning to her duties without hesitation, gathering empty glasses from a nearby table with steady hands. She did not look at Ethan, but she could feel his presence lingering in her awareness like a question she had not agreed to answer. Ethan remained still for a moment longer than necessary. Vanessa had already walked away with a sharp comment and colder silence than the winter outside. Marcus had disappeared into the crowd, likely enjoying the chaos he had indirectly created. And yet Ethan was not thinking about any of them now. He was still thinking about Claire. Not because she had spoken much, but because she had not. Because in a room full of people competing for attention, she had moved like she did not need it. "You are still standing there." Claire's voice came from behind him, calm but not unkind. Ethan turned slightly. "I was observing," he said again, though it sounded less certain than before. Claire raised an eyebrow faintly. "You and Marcus both seem to do a lot of observing." That earned a brief pause from him. "You know Marcus?" "Everyone in this building knows Marcus," she replied simply, stacking empty plates onto her tray. "The difference is I do not pretend to be impressed by him." A faint flicker of amusement crossed Ethan's expression before fading again. "That is not a common opinion in this room." "Most opinions in this room are for sale," Claire said quietly. The words landed gently but firmly between them. Ethan studied her for a moment longer. There was no performance in her tone. No strategy. Just certainty. Around them, the gala continued as if nothing had changed. Glasses clinked. Cameras flashed. People laughed too loudly at jokes they did not fully hear. Yet somehow, the space near Claire felt quieter than the rest of the ballroom. "Why do you work here?" Ethan asked finally. The question was not invasive in tone, but it carried weight. Claire paused briefly, adjusting her tray. "Because I needed a job." "That is not what I meant." She met his gaze for the first time that night, steady and unshaken. "It is the only answer that matters most of the time." A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just unresolved. Then Claire added softly, "You should return to your guest. She is waiting." Ethan glanced across the room where Vanessa was now speaking with investors, laughing at something he could not hear. For a moment he considered walking back, continuing the version of the night that was expected of him. But instead, his attention returned to Claire, who was already moving away toward another table, seamlessly absorbed into the rhythm of service. Something about her refusal to be affected stayed with him longer than it should have. Outside the glass walls of the hotel, the snowstorm intensified, pressing the city into stillness. And inside, Ethan Blackwell realized that for the first time in a long time, he was not the one controlling where his attention went. The snowstorm outside had grown heavier by the time the charity segment of the evening began inside the Blackstone Hotel ballroom. What was once a celebration of wealth and influence had shifted into something quieter, more reflective, as guests gathered around a raised platform where donations were being announced for winter shelters across New York City. Ethan Blackwell stood near the side of the stage, his expression controlled, though his attention was no longer on the numbers being spoken. It was on Claire Donovan. She had returned to the ballroom floor after a brief break, moving again with that same steady rhythm, but something had changed in the way Ethan looked at her now. It was no longer simple observation. It was recognition of something he could not easily categorize. Claire passed near a table where a young boy sat with his mother, both dressed in worn coats that clearly did not belong in this environment. The boy looked cold, his hands red from the winter air outside. Without hesitation, Claire paused, reached into her apron pocket, and quietly placed a folded napkin with a wrapped pastry beside the child's plate. The mother looked up, surprised. "I did not order this," she said softly. Claire offered a small, polite smile. "It is already taken care of," she replied simply before continuing on her way. Ethan saw the exchange from a distance. He noticed everything. The hesitation from the mother, the confusion from the child, the absence of expectation in Claire's expression. There was no announcement, no desire for recognition, just action. Marcus approached Ethan again, lowering his voice slightly. "You have that look again," Marcus said. Ethan did not respond immediately. "What look?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "The one where you are trying to solve something that is not a problem." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I am trying to understand her." Marcus gave a quiet laugh. "That is your first mistake." Before Ethan could reply, the charity director on stage announced the final segment of the evening. A last-minute emergency request had come in from a nearby shelter that had lost heating due to the storm. Additional funding was needed immediately to relocate families before temperatures dropped further. The room reacted with polite murmurs, some guests reaching for checkbooks, others checking phones. Ethan listened without emotion, until he noticed Claire had stopped moving entirely. For the first time that night she was still. Not frozen in shock. Not impressed by the announcement. Just still, as if something in what she heard had pulled her out of the rhythm she normally followed. When her shift ended nearly an hour later, Ethan found himself waiting near the exit corridor again. This time he did not question why. Claire stepped out of the service area, removing her apron, folding it carefully as she walked. She noticed him immediately but did not change her pace. "You are still here," she said. "I wanted to speak with you," Ethan replied. Claire stopped, studying him briefly. "People like you do not usually wait to speak with people like me," she said. Ethan hesitated, the honesty in her voice disrupting something familiar inside him. "People like me usually do not know what to say," he admitted. Claire adjusted her coat slightly. "Then do not try to say the wrong thing." A pause settled between them, quieter than the storm outside. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice lower now. "I saw what you did earlier. With the child." Claire's expression remained calm. "It was nothing." "It was not nothing," Ethan said. Claire looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to continue the conversation. "It was just a moment where someone needed something small more than I needed to be noticed," she said finally. Ethan absorbed the words slowly. In his world, nothing was ever small. Everything was measured. Everything had weight. But in her world, something small could still matter more than everything else combined. Outside the hotel doors, the snow continued to fall over Manhattan, covering the city in silence. And inside, Ethan Blackwell realized that the most difficult thing he had encountered all night was not the storm, not the gala, not even the blind date he had already forgotten. It was a woman who kept making him question what value actually meant. The storm outside had intensified by the time Ethan Blackwell returned to the main ballroom, snow pressing against the glass walls like a silent force trying to get in. Inside, the Christmas gala had reached its peak, with soft orchestral music blending into the murmur of powerful conversations, and the distant sound of glasses touching in quiet celebration. Yet for Ethan, everything felt strangely distant now. He was no longer listening to the room. He was searching for her. Claire Donovan moved near the far side of the ballroom, her tray lighter now, her pace slightly slower as the night began to settle toward its end. She looked the same as she had hours ago, composed, calm, almost invisible to the world around her, yet impossible for him to ignore. Ethan stepped forward before fully deciding to. Marcus noticed immediately but said nothing this time, only watching with a faint expression of curiosity. Ethan crossed the marble floor until he stood a few feet behind her near the service corridor entrance. Claire felt his presence before turning. "You are still here," she said softly, not surprised, only observant. "I was about to leave," Ethan replied, though he had not yet moved. Claire adjusted her tray and set it down carefully on a side table. "Then you should probably do that," she said. Ethan studied her for a moment. The noise of the gala faded slightly behind him, as if the space between them had separated from the rest of the room. "I do not usually stay longer than necessary in places like this," he said. Claire nodded once. "That sounds efficient." Ethan exhaled lightly, almost a quiet laugh. "It is not always efficient," he admitted. Claire glanced toward the ballroom. "People in there seem to think it is." A pause stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just unclaimed. Then Ethan spoke again. "I saw what you did earlier," he said. Claire looked back at him calmly. Which part? All of it, Ethan replied. You do not react like other people do. Claire tilted her head slightly. Other people react a lot. It does not always mean anything. Ethan considered that for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in judgment but in focus. You gave away your entire tip collection tonight, he said. Claire did not deny it. There was a family that needed it more than I did. Ethan's expression shifted subtly. You did not hesitate. Hesitation does not change the outcome, she said simply. That answer landed differently than anything he had heard all evening. Across the room, the final announcements of the charity gala began. Numbers were spoken. Donations were recorded. Applause followed each contribution like clockwork. But near the corridor, none of it reached them fully. Ethan looked at Claire more carefully now, as if seeing beyond what was immediately visible. You work here every night? He asked. Most nights, she replied. And you never think about doing something else? Claire paused briefly, as if the question itself required translation into something she could actually use. Everyone thinks about something else, she said finally. But thinking does not always pay rent. Ethan fell silent at that. Not because he disagreed, but because he realized how far removed his world was from that sentence. He had never once had to think about choosing between thought and survival. A distant announcement echoed through the ballroom as the final charity total was revealed. Applause rose again, polite and practiced. Marcus appeared at the edge of the corridor, leaning casually against the wall. We are closing soon, Marcus said. Your driver is outside. Ethan did not look away from Claire. I know. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Then what are you doing? Ethan hesitated. For the first time that night, he did not have a calculated answer. Claire picked up her tray again, ready to return to work for the final cleanup of the evening. As she turned to leave, Ethan spoke one last time. Will you be here tomorrow? Claire stopped briefly but did not turn around fully. Yes, she said. People always need dinner tomorrow. And just like that, she walked back into the glow of the ballroom, leaving Ethan standing in the quieter edge of the room, realizing that for the first time in his life, something simple had become impossible to ignore.